Hi, this week we're going to talk about some of the secrets we use at thefastingmethod.com to help people lose weight, because most people think it's just about having the right knowledge and having enough willpower, but really it has very little to do with that, and it's coming right up. You can look back at the 1970s and you can see that people all over the world were eating all different diets, some low carb, some high carb, some low fat, some high fat. And yet, there just wasn't a lot of obesity worldwide. And the other thing is that it's hard to imagine that people today have obesity just because there's this epidemic of low willpower and that it's spreading all over the world somehow. Well, if it's not that, then what is it? And this is what we're going to share today about how to lose weight. Having the knowledge is just not enough. If you were to lose weight, you might know, for example, that you need to stop eating cookies and donuts and brownies. Well, that's pretty common sense and everybody can agree on that, but can you stop eating cookies? Well, there's lots of different reasons that people eat cookies, like food addiction, like emotional eating, for example. Hunger is only one reason that we want to eat. We eat for to feel better about ourselves. We eat because it's there, because we're bored, because we want to find pleasure. There's people who have lack of motivation. They say, "What's the point?" And the other thing is that the systems that are there may tempt us to eat. For example, you walk by a store where there's the smell of freshly baked cookies. Well, that may lead you to eat cookies when you wouldn't have otherwise. If you're in a meeting and you're bored and somebody puts a plate of cookies in front of you, you might eat, even though you know that it's not good for your diet. So it's really more than just having that secret diet or having enough willpower. The way that we look at things in the fastingmethod.com is that there's really three levels of that we have to look at. The first is knowledge. And in knowledge, you have to know what the proper diet is. If you have the right information, well, then you can implement it. So are there limiting beliefs that are stopping you? For example, for fasting, maybe you believe that fasting is bad for you. Maybe you believe that it leads to disordered eating. Maybe you believe that it burns muscle. Maybe you believe that it causes starvation mode. Well, those are reasons that you will not do it, and that will limit you. Are there knowledge gaps? Do you not know about the diets that perhaps fasting can be beneficial for you? So that's knowledge, and really that's the sort of easiest thing to fix. You can find all kinds of information these days for free. Check out my YouTube videos, you can go to books, you can go to blogs, and for the most part, the diets we mostly agree on. Don't eat a lot of sugar, don't eat a lot of processed foods, and you probably cover 80% of all diets. But that's the sort of lowest level. There are two other levels that you have to consider when you're trying to lose weight, and these are the much harder things. The second level are the systems and the supports, because it's not simply that you have to decide through your willpower what you eat every single day, day in and day out. We are creatures of habit. So if we develop habits and we have certain ways of doing things, well, we're going to follow those. So it's not about willpower. Think about it this way. In the 1970s, people were accustomed to eating 2 to 3 times a day. As we went into the 2000s, people were now accustomed to eating 5, 6, 7 times a day. So your baseline, if you want to start doing some intermittent fasting or you want to cut down the number of meals you eat, is much different. In the 1970s, you may not have to cut down at all, or maybe just one meal, skip breakfast, for example. Whereas now, if you're starting at 8 meals a day, you got to get down to 1. So these are the systems and the supports, which include things like, how often are you eating? What's your regular habits for eating? But not only that, but say, for example, you don't have snack foods and they aren't available to you. If you wanted to go get a donut, you would have to drive in your car for 10 minutes to get a donut. Well, that's going to stop you from eating donuts. As opposed to if you walk by the donut store every single day on your way into the office. Well, that's going to make a difference because the availability of those foods that are bad for you are always there. It's easy to get, and it's also right in your face. So that is another system. And once you identify these systems and supports that are blocking you, well, you can make an effort to change it. Hey, maybe you don't have to take that way in. Maybe you can take the stairs and avoid that donut shop so that you don't get it. Maybe the coffee shop is also selling cookies and donuts, and maybe you might put a coffee machine in your office so you can avoid those temptations. Well, these are automatic systems that are going to help you. And it's not about the willpower, it's simply thinking smarter and implementing those systems. And there's so many other things that we can dive into. Are there, for example, triggering foods that might be bad for you? For example, if you drink diet soda and you're accustomed to drinking diet soda and it makes you want to snack on something, well, that diet soda, maybe it has 0 calories, maybe it doesn't have a big effect on your hormones, but it's a trigger for you. And therefore, by avoiding that trigger, you can avoid what comes after. Are there triggering environments? Maybe you're used to eating in the movie theater. Maybe you're used to eating in the car. Maybe you're used to eating when you get in the couch. Well, we can swap those habits. Another system that you have to think about, are there enablers or are there people who might sabotage you? For example, we see it all the time where one person wants to lose weight and follow a specific diet and the other person does not, their partner. So they bake cookies all day long. Well, that's not going to make it easy for you. Or if somebody is really against a certain diet and keeps eating those foods, sugary foods, despite the other person not. And that's where it's important to figure out what those issues are so you can come to some agreement. Are there healthy habits that you can develop? For example, maybe you can go for a walk after every meal. Well, that's going to be good. It's going to stop you from eating as much because you're going out for a walk, and it's a nice healthy habit. Can you swap habits? Instead of having something in front of the TV, could you have a glass of tea, for example, green tea? And there's so many others. Perhaps the issue is food addiction. That's a real issue. Some people simply cannot control themselves once they have that. And if you identify the system, then you can start to develop something that you can do about it. Maybe they have to journal, maybe they have to think about it, meditate a little bit, or something like that. It's not about knowing, hey, maybe I should count my macros. If your issue is food addiction or unhealthy habits or having enablers or saboteurs, knowing just isn't enough. You gotta have those systems in place. There's accountability. Is somebody going to be looking over your shoulder and making sure you do it? That's what mom used to do. That's why college kids put on 10, 15 pounds, because all of a sudden there's nobody to keep them accountable for the food choices that they make. All of a sudden it's beer and pizzas and wings all day long, and all of a sudden you got the freshman 15. Are there things that you can do to stay busy? Can you put it on the schedule? If you're busy doing work, well, you're not going to be thinking about food. Maybe you have to do something about trigger environments like the kitchen, for example. But if you're the one to cook, what can you do about it? What are your pain points? Do you have to do some more practice to build that fasting muscle? And mindfulness is another system that you can use to identify what is going wrong here. Are you hungry or are you just bored? Because a lot of times people are just bored. So these are all part of the second sort of level that we have to get to really get to the bottom of what's causing people to gain weight. And these are the systems and support. Nowhere in here do we talk about willpower, because we know that people have willpower. They just need to get it out of this idea that that's all they need, and they have to build in these healthy systems, and you have to identify what the issue is, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to attack it. And that's what we work on at thefastingmethod.com through our coaches, through our classes, to try and identify these sort of second level things. But there's more. There's still a third level that you have to think about. The third level that you really have to think about are emotional factors. We're eating for so many reasons. We want to feel good. We're having dinner with friends or whatever. So there's all of these emotional factors to try to identify. First, perhaps people are emotional eaters. This is very common. These are reasons that people are going to eat even though they're not hungry. And in order to get to fix it, you have to identify what the emotion is. Now you can start to try to turn it into something a little bit more productive. So, hey, maybe I'm under stress, I'm going to take a hot bath. Or I'm under stress, I'm going to go get a massage. Well, that's a lot healthier for you than eating a big bag of chips, for example. So emotional eating is a huge issue. And then you have to identify what can you do to support people in their emotions, because it's not just these emotions, there's positive emotions like inspiration. Are people lacking the inspiration? Are people lacking the motivation? Saw this a lot during COVID. People were eating and eating and eating. Why? Because everything that they used to do for fun was taken away from them. Couldn't go out with family, couldn't go out with friends, everything was closed, couldn't go outside, stay in your house, stay in your house. Well, the only thing that you're allowed to do for pleasure was eat. So people ate and ate and ate. And we know that a lot of people gain weight. I don't blame them, because I know that that's not their fault. It's not a lack of willpower. It was those emotional factors that got them through. So what we have to do is say, look, if that's the issue and people are eating for pleasure because they have nothing else, let's fill it with other things to do. And as we're coming out of this pandemic, there's lots of other things we can do. And we can say, oh, let's just do some, get together, we'll hang out, we'll go for walks, we'll go for hikes, or whatever it is that you have. Is it a negative emotion? Are you fearing diseases? Are you fearing consequences? Do you have some other fear that's hindering you from eating a healthy diet? So identifying these emotions then allows you to say, well, let's see what we can do. Let's build these community supports, because if you have the support of the whole community, guess what? Everything's a lot easier. So is it small groups like friends? Maybe we can develop small groups like we do at thefastingmethod.com. In our communities, in our coaching groups, we have small groups that help each other. And then there's larger groups like the community. And these are where you can go in our forums, you can talk to, and there's peer supports. You're not getting help from somebody who's an authority figure like myself or a coach. You're also getting support from everyone around you who's doing the same thing as you and knows what it feels like to be in that situation. It's very powerful. In school, we call it peer pressure because there's so much pressure to conform to the peer group. In adults, we generally call it peer support because generally we're more supportive. And if people are pressuring us to do things we don't want to, we can remove ourselves from that situation. So that peer support, that small group support, that large group support is crucial. In fact, that's probably the most important thing that we do, is provide this support, because people have the knowledge already. People have the willpower already. The other emotional factors that we really have to look at is stress. A lot of people are undergoing a lot of stress. And if stress is the issue, you got to deal with it in a separate way. There's all kinds of ways that you deal with stress that have nothing to do with the diet. There are things you can do to relax, things like exercise, things like meditation, things like yoga, things like massage, therapeutic touch. There's a lot of things. Forest bathing, going out into nature has been shown to be very, very soothing for people. And that's something that you might take into account, because if stress is the issue, then fixing your diet is not necessarily going to help. Sleep is another issue. A lot of people just don't get enough sleep. And when they don't get enough sleep, maybe they get the munchies, or maybe they get this, maybe they get that. And then they think they have no willpower. But the problem was that they weren't getting enough sleep. So the other things that we often talk about is self-sabotage. Are people setting themselves up for failure by not considering these other higher levels? Not just the knowledge, but the systems, the supports, and the emotions. What are your coping strategies? What about mindfulness again? Because that also plays into those emotional factors. So look at all these issues that we talk about that are so important for weight loss. I mean, we talk about these systems, triggers, and environments, and all these other things. We talk about emotions, we talk about stress, we talk about sleep, we talk about positive emotions, we talk about community supports. Well, that's what's important, not whether or not you should hit your macro or whether or not you know that cookies are bad for you. That's only the first level. These other second level, the system supports, and the third level, those emotions, those are things that we can help you find at thefastingmethod.com. In our groups, we talk about it in our groups, because ultimately we're going to get support from each other and we can help each other through this. There's lots of places you can also look for that within your own community. But remember, weight loss and really any type of behavior change goes far beyond just knowing the right diet or thinking that all you need is willpower. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you're interested in this, please check out thefastingmethod.com for coaching, for community supports. We have great programs built to help people. You can also check out my other videos on YouTube, and particularly this one where I talk about weight loss and some of those other important issues from a dietary standpoint, and why calorie counting is simply not enough. I'll see you next week, everybody.